Hello, everyone. Oh my God. Good morning. How are all of you? I know many of you have been waiting for this. It's here. This is the 13th part of a book called Sunshine by the lovely Robin McKinley. So excited. Kitty, thank you once again for your support of me through Patreon. This is all yours. I think we are now at a year of Patreon. That has been a year of my life. That is so weird to think about. Um, anyway, this book. I can't stop talking about it. So instead of just talking about it, let me read it. Here we go. Librarian Parkbloods. You have to excuse me. I had a cold before I went to Wisconsin. And I spent a lot of time talking yesterday. I'm hoping my voice is not going out. Anyway, Librarian Parkbloods are probably flash easy to find, said Emil. We'll be the ones who belong to Other Watch and Beware. These are the two biggest GlobeNet travelers for exclusive to the Dark Line. For a modest extra monthly fee, you too can download 11 jillion gigabits every week and experience mental overkill paralysis. Unless you are a trained member of SOF, or a research librarian, or a prune-faced academic, or have a cyborg overdrive button for taking info. I don't always have the overdrive button. Besides, I'd always had a guilty preference for fiction. Since I seem now to be living fiction, this proved to have been an entirely reasonable choice. I spent a few hours every week reading certain threads and, well, following my nose. We contacted her because because the filters she'd set up herself on her subscription passwords seemed to bring her a peculiarly high level of source traffic by others, and Partbloods, not just about them. So we had her in for a few chats, and once she softened up a little, did someone turn blue for you too? I said. Emil smiled. Yeah. We found out that that nose of hers often told her when your actual other had actual fingers on the keyboard, and that has sometimes been very interesting, said Jessie. Especially when she picks up a sucker, said Pat. They all saw me freeze. Oh. Hey, kiddo, said Pat. That's kind of the point, you know? Nailing vampires, remember? I nodded stiffly. The rift, or did I mean rifts, in my life were getting deeper and wider all the time. I only just stopped myself from reaching up to touch the thin white scar on my breast. If any of these people had noticed that I had spent the entire sweltering summer wearing high-necked shirts, they hadn't mentioned it. And they weren't mentioning that I had suddenly stopped wearing them for a mere autumn burst of pleasantly warm weather either. I I just don't like talking about vampires, I said after a moment. If 1/5 of the world's wealth, or possibly more, lay in vampire hands, well, what? That's an interesting fact. I say that like this is National Geographic. I meant in the world building. Though I would not be surprised if 1/5 of the world's wealth was held by actual vampires. It would explain a lot about our country. Of course, there were a lot of them out there with not just basic comm gear to handle their bloated bank balances, but monster comm networks that meant they'd probably stop noticing they weren't able to go outdoors in daylight. Plenty of human comm techies never went out in daylight either. But comm networks would include trog lines into the GlobeNet. Some vampires who had them no doubt amused themselves chatting up humans. I knew this, but those vampires were scary faceless boogie people that SOF existed to deal with. What was I doing here in a SOF office? Our blood sticking together, I suppose. What if I told them I didn't know I was one of the lucid 10%? I shivered. Did Bo have a line into the GlobeNet? He was a master vampire. Of course he did. Did Khan? I shivered again, harder. Sunshine, I'm sorry, Emil said. I know it doesn't mean much, but sometimes when I'm tracking something, even that much contact through however many miles of trog and ether, it starts to make me sick. I can't imagine what it must be like for you. True. Now, about that tea, said Pat. You still haven't told me why you're here, like today, now, in this minute in Pat's office, I said to Emil. She shook her head. Serendipity, I guess. I showed up this afternoon to plug in my usual report. Pat brought me in here and said I was about to meet an old friend who was also a new recruit. Maybe I could reassure her that having anything to do with SOF doesn't automatically mean you're going to lose your interest in reading fiction, and will wake up some morning soon with an overwhelming urge to wear khaki and start a firearm collection. Pat, who was wearing navy blue trousers and a white shirt, said, Hey, navy blue and white are khaki too, said Emil firmly. But Ray, I didn't know it was you till you walked through the door. Then why are you saying you're sorry about what happened to me? What do you know about it? Emil stared at me, visibly puzzled. What happened since the other night? All of Old Town knows you were in some kind of trouble with suckers. Those 2 days you went missing last spring, and a lot of us were already wondering, what else could it have been? Right. What else could it have been? Well, about that, none of you know, and I don't even know how they would react if they knew. Could have been a rogue demon, I said obstinately. Ugh, Neil sighed. Not very likely. A lot of parbloods can spot other parbloods, right? I haven't got I haven't got Pat's gift for that. But a full-blood demon. If you'd been held by rogues, I'd have known it. Like cat hair on your shirt. So would whoever from Soph interviewed you have known it. Soph wouldn't have assigned someone to interview you who wouldn't have known it. And Jacasta's good, said Pat, even better than me. Good wasn't the adjective I'd have chosen for my experience of that interview, but I let it pass. So would a lot of other people who came into Charlie's have known it. Emil continued. Haven't you noticed? Well, like that Mrs. Bielowski hardly lets you out of her sight these days. Mrs. Bielowski is a weir, I said. Yeah, and her sense of smell is real good, said Pat. She's another undercover Soph, I suppose, I said. Pat laughed. Soph couldn't hold her, he said. She and Yulon should get together, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. If Soph had no reason to look into my landlady, I wasn't going to suggest it to them. If Pat thought she was a Siddhartha, all the better. Oh, excuse me. And if they already had looked, I didn't want to know. Jessie said gently, You know there's such a thing as friends as well as colleagues and neighbors, don't you? Oh my God. I had my mouth open to say, Sure. And you'd have been hanging around Charlie's watching me with at least 4 eyes a day if it had just been some poor mug that got mixed up in something ickily other, right? And then I closed it again, because I realized that the answer was yes. They might not have been watching me so intensely, and they might not have been watching me in the hopes that whatever had happened might lead them to something they could use without reference to a continuing and uninterrupted supply of cinnamon rolls. They would have been watching me. Because that was what Soph was for. In theory, the first and most important thing it was for, to keep our citizens safe. And Soph, for all its faults, took that pretty seriously. I sighed. So, how about that cup of tea? And then maybe you'll finally tell me why you wanted me to meet Emil here? Pat spun his comm box around, so the screen faced Emil. She sat down and tapped herself in, and the screen cleared to the GlobeNet symbol. I averted my eyes. Since I'd started seeing in the dark, I couldn't look at any comm screen for long. TV, net, personal, game deluxe. Not my territory. But Kenny had an amazing one. Whatever. Ugh. Vertigo wasn't in it, although migraine came close. At least I wasn't wasting up subscription fees on Overwatch and Beware by not having gone near my comm box lately. I could tell, however, watching out of my peripheral vision, that Emil was calling up lists of mail saves. Lists. She chose a list, hit a button, and mail text blocks appeared. Felt an almost physical jolt and reached out to steady myself on the back of her chair. Oh, said Pat, watching me. What? I said nastily. I don't like surprises, especially this kind of surprise, and this was my second since I came through the front door of Soph headquarters. Emil said, studying the screen, I save anything that I guess comes from another, right? That feels funny. That's what these guys pay me for. There are a lot of us doing it. We don't know each other. We don't know who each other are, of course, but I doubt we're all librarians. And when some net tag is making a lot of us jumpy, Soph tries to find out more about who's or what's behind it. Jessie asked me to separate off some tags that are on Soph's active list that I personally think feel like vampires rather than something else, and we wondered if any of them might mean something to you. Locationally, said Jessie. What the hell? Locationally? I thought irreverently. Is this the same English that I speak? After what happened the other night, said Jessie, the way you knew where it was, even though it was too far away for you to hear in the usual way, or see. What made you jump when Emil opened her mail save list? Wow, they're really observant. I mean, they have to be. It's their job. I shook my head. Presumably I'm reacting to what you want me to be reacting to. Yes, I said, but whether it's going to be anything but a sensation like putting your finger in an electric socket, I don't know. Try it, said Jessie. Emil stood up from the chair and I sat down, trying to examine myself for signs that my evil gene was waking up. This would be a logical moment for it, I felt, and probably quite a practical one, too, from the perspective of lingering final moments of philanthropic sanity. Jessie and Pat would be trained in hand-to-hand, and even a mock, and Thor as hell with the muscles you get if you bash the blob into trays of cinnamon rolls every morning. I should be a pushover for a couple of veteran soft field agents. The screen glowed at me balefully. I shut my eyes. Nothing was happening. My body went on breathing quietly, waiting for me to ask it to do something. What do I do? If you hit next, Emil said, you go to the next message. I opened my eyes long enough to find the next button. I could look at the keyboard. I glanced at the screen. The words there wriggled. I didn't like it, but it didn't say vampire to me either. I hit next. More wriggly words? Ugh, nothing else, though. I hit next. And then the next. Oh, boy. There was an odd building up of internal pressure that I couldn't quite put down either to trying to look while not looking at a comm screen that was longing to give me a lightning bolt, thunder roll, old Odin bloody headache, or to the knowledge that I was surrounded by softs, avidly waiting for me to do something, or that I was waiting to pop into Incredible Hulk mode and try to eat somebody. So I guess that my shady rapport, affinity, global navigational pinpoint precision positioning device, patent pending. Oh, her little comments are so entertaining. And whatever was acknowledging the presence of vampires somewhere out there behind the screen. But so? Next. I was sweating. I realized what the pressure was. Expectation. I was getting close. Close to what? Next. Here. What is this? What is happening? I snapped my eyes closed and flung myself back in the chair, which rolled several feet away from the desk, till it hit the corner of a table pushed against the wall. An unhandily stacked heap of paper spilled off onto the floor with a swoosh. I got up, shakily, keeping my eyes averted from the screen. I could feel the beating of the here. I turned my head back and forth as if I was standing in a field looking for a landmark. No, not there. I moved round a quarter turn and waited to reorient the here. No, I moved another quarter turn, almost. An eighth turn back. No, an eighth turn forward, then another eighth. Yes, here. I raised an arm. That way. Now turn whatever it is off, because it's making me sick. Emil dived for it and the screen went blank. I sat down. Well, said Pat, because what else could you say? I wonder if that's exactly the reaction they thought she would have, or if it... Oh, my God. The satisfaction in his voice made me suddenly very angry, but I felt too tired and sick to tell him so. I closed my eyes. I opened them a minute later. Steam from the cup of hot tea was caressing my face. I accepted the cup. Caffeine was my friend. I wasn't sure if I had any other friends in that room or not. The special other forces exist to control, defeat, neutralize, or exterminate all other threat to humans. That was easy and straightforward, and as a human it had sounded pretty good to me, although at the same time I had a problem with the politics of anything other defined as bad, which seemed to be the unofficial soft motto. Now I was learning that in fact soft was, apparently, full of part-bloods, maybe full-bloods, and presumably wares, and was clandestinely sympathetic to the registry dodgers. It should have cheered me up. If I was a part-blood myself, I was a part-blood among part-bloods. I should be eager to cooperate with my own little group of softs, who hated vampires. All vampires, by definition. Who hated and targeted vampires because they believed that vampires were not merely making everybody's lives more dangerous, but their own lives harder. Their lives as good, socially well-adjusted, and well-disposed part demons, as weirs who only needed a night off once a month. If it wasn't for vampires, so Pat's theories went, the humans would probably repeal the laws that automatically prevented anyone with other blood from enjoying full human rights. The theory is probably right. Not to mention that less than 100 years before we all go under the dark thing. It wasn't only that seeing in the dark creeped me out because it came from a vampire, it was that it made me permanently, relentlessly, continuously conscious of being connected to vampireness. I do not know what I have given you tonight. I do not know what you have given me. And how is this going to manifest? What other things are going to happen? I don't even know. I was aware of it standing motionless outdoors at noon on a sunny day. Even the absence of shadow is a kind of shadow. You may not know that, but I do. I did now. I wondered if this was anything like the, dare I say, usual realization of part-bloodedness, knowing that you are, and are not, human, but angrily, frustratedly believing that this didn't make you any less of a what exactly? A human? A person? An individual? A rational creature? Remind me that you are a rational creature. I wish I could ask somebody, but nobody was part vampire. It was impossible. Whatever I was, that wasn't it. Was it? Was it? Drink your tea, sunshine, and stop thinking. Thinking is not your strong suit. Actually, I think it is, but I get why she said that. There was something else that was bothering me about all this, but I couldn't get that far yet. I didn't have to. Where I was far enough to feel no mad about it. Feeling better, said Pat. No, I said. Do you know what you were pointing at? No, I said. I looked up along the line I had indicated and thought about which way the soft building lay and where I thought it was in it. I'd probably been pointing west, something like west. That wasn't a big help. West was where all the deserted factories were, where the worst of the urban bad spots were. Nobody lived out that way now, as the population slowly began to recover from the voodoo wars. Rather than trying to reclaim any of that area, new malls and office blocks and housing developments were going up in the south and the east, and also avoiding the lake and its bad spots, curling around eventually, avoiding druggy nirvana, up to the north. The reason anybody was trying to salvage Chesterfield was because it was south. In 20 or 30 years, we in the next town to the south, Piscataway, would probably be one big city, unless we all went under the dark early. The western end of New Arcadia isn't entirely deserted. It has some rather murky, small businesses scattered around and some clubs the police keep closing down that open again, that open again a day or a week later. Sometimes they reopen briefly somewhere else. Sometimes they don't bother to pretend to move. It is the western end of town where gangs of mostly human, mostly teenage boys go to play chicken and look for vampires. It is also a popular area for squatters, although the attrition by death rate is pretty severe. A lot of the murky small businesses that manage to hold on there cater to squatters who can't afford to pay for housing, but if they want to stay alive, have to pay for some warding. There are two kinds of cheap wards, the ones that don't work and the ones that mess with what, for want of a better phrase, I'm going to call black magic, which gives you the idea. The homeless are better off sleeping in the gutters in Old Town, but I admit that for Old Town's sake, it's a good thing most of them don't. It didn't take a calm box or a kick in the head to tell anyone in New Arcadia that if they were looking for suckers, to look west. I was pointing west, I said grudgingly. Big deal. We don't know if it's a big deal yet or not, said Pat reasonably. We won't know till we drive you out there. No, I said. It might be, for example, Pat continued unfazed, that it isn't the west of New Arcadia at all, because it could be somewhere a lot farther away. Springfield, Lucknow, Manchester. Manchester had a rep as a vampire city. The GlobeNet is the GlobeNet. You never know where a specific piece of cosmail has come from. Unless you're soft and you track it down, I said. There was a little silence. Jesse sighed. It's not that easy. I mean, tracing something off the net is never easy. There are all those boring laws about privacy, I said. Which even Soph has to make an effort to break, said Pat. But a lot of the usual rules of physics don't quite work the same with others as with humans, Jesse continued. Yeah, I thought. How does a 180-pound man turn into a 90-pound wolf? Where does the leftover 90 go? Does he park it in the umbrella stand overnight? Bless. Oh, sunshine. Geography of vampires is one of the worst. Where they are and where we are often doesn't seem to relate. Vampire senses are different from human in a number of ways. It is not the distance that is crucial, but the uniformity. Evidently, this worked in both directions. Einstein was wrong. I wonder if it was too late to give my skeggy old physics teacher a bad day. So even if we got a good read off a cosmail that we were sure was lobbed by a sucker, we still might not know any more than we did before we wasted some of Soft's tax blinks cracking it. We can use all the help we can get. Which I think I said to you already not long ago, added Pat. You might also keep in mind that the guys who don't want to be found usually have the edge on us guys who want to find them. Even the human ones, and they're usually easier. Sunshine, give us a break. We're not trying to ruin your life for fun, you know. I stared into the bottom of my mug. Not Jesse or Pat's fault that I was bound to a vampire. I didn't think they'd be real open to the idea of making an exception for him. I wasn't happy about it myself, but I could hardly tell Pat that the reason Soph was so full of covert parbloods now made me feel worse, not better. I was getting to a pretty bad place if I was beginning to wonder if maybe going bonkers and having to be bagged for my own good might be my best choice. What if what I had pointed toward was con? No. The answer came almost at once. No, what I had pointed toward was something in itself sick-making, antithetical to humans, to anything warm and breathing. Betrayal would be a different sort of sick. I was sure. I was pretty sure. A human shouldn't be able to think in terms of betraying a vampire. It didn't work. Like those nonsense sentences they used to wake you up when you were supposed to be learning foreign languages. I eat the hat of my uncle. I sit upon the cat of my aunt. Depends on the cat, of course. It didn't work, like being able to see in the dark didn't work. The bottom of my mug was in shadow. I hadn't drunk the last swallow because I had a fine dust of tea leaves in it. Even they threw tiny shadows within the shadow, floating in the shadowy dark liquid. Okay, I said. It might have been Bo I'd found, that I'd felt through the globe net, that was about as sick-making a thought as I could have. Bo, that Khan was supposed to be finding, so we could go spoke his wheel before he spoked ours. Again, permanently. Then you'll come with us? I thought about it. There wasn't much to think. I have to be back at 6, I said. You got it, said Pat. Oh, God, this is happening, isn't it? She's going to go with them. Oh, my God. It was just Pat and Jessie and me. Emil went back to the library. When we awkwardly said goodbye, her face was full of bright shadows I couldn't read. I looked at her, trying to resettle her in my mind as a Parplet and a Soph. Did it take that much effort? I don't know. It was taking me a lot of effort to be whatever I now was. While Pat did some shifting papers around things and Jessie disappeared for a few minutes, I moved over to the sunlight falling through the gray window of Pat's office. The sunlight felt thin, but it was sunlight. Soft windows were all gray because of the proof glass. Proof against bullets, firebombs, kamikaze weirs. That's a thing? What? Glass and steel cutting demon talons. Spells, charms, almost everything but an armored division with howitzers. Proof glass had only come on the market about 10 years ago, just after the wars, which might have been a little less fatal if it had been invented a few years earlier. All high-risk businesses in the military and most of the government departments, plus a lot of paranoids, both the kind with real enemies and the other kind, now had proof glass in their windows and their vehicles. Proof glass upgrader was a popular new career among young magic handlers. You didn't have to be a magic handler to get hired as an upgrader, but you'd probably live longer. Nobody had figured out how to make it less gray, though. Gray and depressing, like being in jail. Had they done studies that humans really need sunlight? Not just light, sunlight. And all humans, not just me? I hoped Charlie's wasn't going to have to put in proof glass. I hoped I was still human. Pat drove and put me in the front seat with him. Can you still feel whatever? I thought about it. Reluctantly, I poked around for that feeling of here. I found it. It was like finding a dead rat in your living room. A large dead rat. Yes, I said. West? Yes. We drove. Old county buildings quickly became Old Town, which turned almost as quickly into downtown and then rather more slowly into nothing in particular town. Blocks of slightly shabby houses giving way to blocks of somewhat seedy shops and offices and back again. It wasn't a big city. We went over the line into what most of us called No Town far too soon. In the first place, I didn't want to go there at all. In the second place, I didn't like being reminded that it was so close. New Arcadia's only big bad spots are in No Town, which did compel a certain amount of evasive driving. Even a soft car can only go where there are still roads, and urban bad spots get blocked off fast. But we weren't going indirectly enough for me. Here moved out of the back of my mind into the front, like a large zombie rat getting up off your living room floor and following you into the kitchen, where you realize that it's bigger and uglier than you thought, and its teeth are longer, and while zombies are really, really stupid, they're also really, really vicious. They're also nearly as fast as vampires. Since they don't just happen, they're made for a purpose. If one is coming after you, that's probably its purpose, and you're in big trouble. Oh, God. Here was getting worse. I was going to burst out of my skull and dance on the dashboard, and it wouldn't be anything anyone wanted to watch. Stop, I said. Pat stopped. I tried to breathe. The zombie rat seemed to be sitting on my chest, so I couldn't. I couldn't see it anymore, though. There didn't seem to be anything left but its little red eyes. No, its huge, drowning, no-color eyes. I can't any more turn around, I think is what I said. I don't remember. I remember after Pat turned around and started driving back toward Old Town. After what felt like a long time, I began breathing again. I was clammy with sweat. My head ached as if pieces of my skull had been broken and the edges were grinding together. But Zombie Rat was gone. That had been far too much like the bad spot the soft car hadn't protected us from, the day Jesse and Pat took me back out to the lake, the house on the lake. Those no-color eyes, both mirror flat and chasm deep, if they were eyes. But we hadn't tried to drive through a bad spot. Excuse me, and this time it wasn't just me. Pat and Jesse hadn't noticed anything, except my little crisis. Excuse me. I didn't know if I was angry at their making me try to do whatever, or at the fact that I'd failed. I'd been to No Town when I was a teenager. It wasn't like I had no idea. Any teenager with the slightest pretensions toward being stark, Spartan, whatever, which I'm afraid I had, will probably give it a try if it's offered, and it will be offered. And no town is a rite of passage. Quite sensible kids go at least once. I'd been there more than once. Some of the clubs were pretty Spartan by anyone's standards. Kenny said, out of Mom's hearing. This was still true. And it was also still true, Kenny said, if that you dared each other to climb farther in, over the rubble around the bad spots, although nobody got very far. But I hadn't got any less far than anyone else when I was his age. So had whatever it was moved there since my time, or was I just more sensitive now than I had been? Maybe it's the latter, and whatever it is not closer. I don't sound very certain. No town was actually a lot cleaner now than it had been when I was 16 and 17, which was right after the wars. Having been once captured by vampires, did I now overreact to their presence? If overreact to vampires wasn't a contradiction in terms, or was this another horrible, specific one-off, like my having heard the giggler when no one else could? I didn't know if I wanted the answer to be yes or no. If it was no, then it might mean my sucker connection was general, which didn't bear thinking about. But if it was yes, then it meant I was picking up something to do with Bo, which didn't bear thinking about. Unless it was Khan. Unless this had been his daylight wards protecting him, protecting us, in the company of a couple of sucker-hating softs. No, it wasn't Khan. Whatever it wasn't Khan. Pat drove around into the soft back lot again. Neither of them had said any word of blame or failure or frustration to me, although I felt I could hear them both thinking. Words like triangulation. I didn't know if they'd marked where I'd made them turn around. Probably. But neither of them mentioned it. Yet. I take you straight to Charlie's, but I don't think you want the neighborhood seeing you show up in a soft car, Pat said, as offhand as if we'd been buying groceries. I started to shake my head. Unmarked soft cars were like softs out of uniform. You still knew, but changed my mind. Thanks. I fumbled for the door handle. Do you want to come back in? You look a little worn. There are a few bedrooms in the back. They're pretty basic, but they have beds, and they're quiet. Or I could run you home. This time I did manage to shake my head. Carefully. No, thanks. I'm going for a walk. Clear my head. The last thing I wanted to do was lie down in a small dark room and try to go to sleep. I didn't want to go home either. There might be a dead rat in the living room. Oh. I got out of the car, lifted my face to the sunlight. It felt like a good fairy's kiss. Except good fairies don't exist. Only the bad ones? Every time this book reveals new information, I swear. I lost my place. Oh, as I walked toward the exit, Pat called after me. Hey, didn't you want to tell us something when you came in? I looked at him, at the way the shadows fell across his face. He was leaning on the roof of the car, which was unmarked cop car blue. That's probably why the shadows in the hollows of his eyes, his upper lip, his throat, looked blue. I forget now, it said. It'll come back to me. Pat smiled a little, a twitch of the lips. Sorry, sunshine. I raised a hand and turned away again. He said softly, See you. He could have meant only that he'd seen me at Charlie's, where we'd seen each other for years. But I knew that wasn't what he meant. What are they going to use her for next? Oh my God. I went for a long walk. I spiraled slowly through Old Town from the outside edge, where soft headquarters and City Hall lie on the boundary between Old Town and the downtown, to the next circle where the area library and the other museum and the older city buildings are, through several small parks and down the long green aisle of General Astor's Way, purple in autumn with Michaelmas? I don't know. I've never seen that kind of daisy before. Michaelmas. Interesting. Michaelmas. Some municipal gardener's idea of a joke. And then into the back streets of Charlie's neighborhood, where everyone gets lost occasionally, even people who have lived there all their lives, like Charlie and Mary and Kyoko. I was used to getting lost. I didn't mind. I'd come to something I recognized eventually. I wandered and thought about the latest thing I didn't want to talk about. There seemed to be so many things I didn't want to talk about lately. I didn't want to think about my increasing sense that something had happened to Khan, and that it mattered. There is no fellowship between humans and vampires. We are fire and water, heads and tails, north and south, day and night. Maybe I was imagining the bond. Maybe it was a way of dealing with what had happened, like post-traumatic thingamy. Khan himself said the bond existed, but he could be wrong too. Vampires are deadly, but no one says they're infallible. I blinked my treacherous eyes, watching the things in the shadows slither and sparkle. I had plenty to worry about already, I didn't have to worry about vampires, too. One vampire, the last thing I wanted to be doing was worrying about him. No, the next to last thing. The last thing I wanted was to be bound to him. I hadn't thought I had any, did I mean innocence to lose after those 2 nights on the lake? I didn't know you could go on finding out you'd had stuff by losing it. This didn't seem like a very good method to me. Oh, sunshine, oh. Over 2 months of being slowly poisoned probably hadn't been really good for me either. The nightmares had been bad. But in a way, they'd still been pure. I'd made a mistake I'd paid dearly for, but it had been a mistake. A month ago, I'd called on Con. Okay, I was at the end of my tether, but I'd still ask a vampire for help. Not Mel, not a human doctor of human medicine, and he'd help me. The nightmares I'd had since weren't pure at all. My thought paused there, teetering on the edge of a precipice, and then fell over. What if it hadn't been a mistake, driving out to the lake? What if I'd had to do it, if not that exact thing, then something similar? What if that restlessness I hadn't been able to name had caused exactly what it had meant to cause? That question I hadn't asked Con out by the lake. Is my dad another of your old enemies? Or your old friends? Between the dark thoughts inside my head and the leaping, glittery shadows my eyes saw, I had to stop. I was at the edge of Old Roy's Park. I groped my way to a bench and sat down. I sat there and stared at the tree opposite me and the way the rough edges of its bark seemed to wriggle where they lay in shade. My thoughts were stuck on that night on the lake. I never liked coincidence much, but I hated the sense I was making now. I watched the wiggling bark. It occurred to me that this was new. I'd been seeing into shadows, but merely what was there, as if there was a rather erratic light on it. This was something else, which gave me something I could bear to think about, so I thought about it. A few more minutes passed, and it seemed to me it was as if I was watching the tree breathing. I found a leaf in shadow, and looked at it for a while. It twinkled, as if with tiny starbursts, but rather than thinking, weird, I kept watching, till there seemed to be a pattern. I thought, it's as if I'm watching its pores, opening and closing. I looked down at my hands. The shadows between the fingers gleamed like a banked fire. The tiny shadows laid by the veins on the backs of them were a tiny flickering dark green, edged with a tinier, even more flickering red. The daylight part of the veins looked as it always did. In the shadow places I could see the blood moving. Oh, that's weird. I was sitting in sunlight, not shade. I'd automatically chose sun if there was any sun to be had. I remembered the sun on my back the first morning at the lake, like the arm of a friend. I closed my eyes. I heard the footsteps, but I didn't expect them to pause. Pardon me, said a voice. Are you all right? Who is this? Oh, no, I'm nervous. I opened my eyes. An old woman stood there, a little bent over, leaning on the handle of her two-wheeled shopping cart. You look tired, she said. Can I fetch you anything? There's a shop on the corner, and it has a payphone. Can I call someone for you? She had a nice face. She would be someone you would be glad to have as a neighbor, or as a regular at the coffee house you and your family ran. I looked at the shadows that fell half across her face and saw, I don't know how, that she was a part blood. And that something about my expression was maybe making her guess I might be going through finding that out about myself. And remembering how hard this was, she was going to ask me, a total stranger, if I was all right. I hauled myself back into the ordinary world, and the vision faded. The shadows that fell across her face reverted to being the usual, disorienting, see-through, funny-edged shadows I'd been seeing for a month. She smiled. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disturb you. I thought perhaps, or you might perhaps, want to be disturbed, I said. Yes. Isn't it silly how upsetting just thinking can be? It's not silly at all. The insides of our minds are the scariest things there are. Who is this woman? Is it a coincidence? I'm scared. I'm scared, Kitty. As usual, this is fantastic. I adore this book. I adore you. Thank you so much for supporting me and getting me into this. I would have never read it without you. Thank you very much. Off I go.